What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Bootleg Football Podcast. We got a big episode today. Lots of deals signed and not signed, surprisingly enough, with the franchise deadline come and gone. And we're also going to talk about the huge elephant in the room with camp only days away, really. And that's how COVID is going to affect the start or potentially delay the start of the NFL and college seasons. Massive episode today, but as usual, first things first, before we dive in, my wonderful co-host EJ Snyder is here with me. EJ, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. Summer has finally hit the Northwest. We've had 3 days in a row with no clouds, about 72 degrees, light breeze, no bugs, no humidity. This is the time us Pacific Northwesterners live for. So I'm digging that. I'm glad that we've got some fresh stuff to talk about on the football horizon. And while I do not have a drink again tonight, I do have a whiskey quote for you, because I was telling a friend of mine that I was taking a break from drinking. And my friend Carol, shout out to Carol, said, "When you want whiskey, water just tastes like sadness."
Oh, yeah, that hits me right in the core.
Yeah, it should. Because it hit me in the core. And after I got done laughing, I realized how true it was. So shout out to Carol. Maybe we'll put that on a bootleg t-shirt. But despite my lack of whiskey, I'm excited because we got a lot of big names to talk about. And we've got the elephant in the room. We've got the sort of big news that's looming. We'll get to that. But let's kick it off with some big money before we get to all that.
Yeah, so Chris Jones became the second Chiefs player to sign a massive contract in the past week. I don't know where the hell they're finding this money, but they're making it work. He got 4 years, $85 million, up to $60 million total in guarantees. Just a huge deal. It's $21.25 million per year if you don't want to do the math in your head, which puts him behind only Aaron Donald among interior defensive line, but still ahead of DeForest Buckner, who got 4 years, $84 million. So he just barely beat out Buckner. Surprisingly, did not reset the defensive tackle market. I think if he was an actual free agent, he probably could have, but I think he probably took a little bit less just because the Chiefs are a little bit up against it in the cap, and he wants to stay with a winning program where he can win a lot of, at least potentially win a lot of Super Bowl rings, keep the momentum of his career going, because he's on trajectory to have a pretty special career accolades-wise, and $21.25 million is still a hell of a lot of money. So I think he kind of put the team before his own self-interest there, and he stuck around to a winning program where he can win a lot of games over the next 4 years. Overall, I will say, not the greatest run defender. Like, he's really good in terms of stopping zone runs, really good penetration, getting in the backfield, and that is the best way to stop the zone run game, is penetration. In terms of like two-gapping, stack, shed, get in the hole, really kind of digging in his heels against power, I've highlighted before on my film room show, like, he's not the best stack and shed run defender, not the best eye awareness, I'll say, in terms of being able to find the ball and get the ball. But in terms of just pure penetration ability against zone runs, and obviously as a pass rusher, he's elite of the elite. Would you say that $21.25 million is fair, since he's not as complete a player as maybe some other defensive tackles, and he's just so good at what he does do well? Or would you have let him go to the market?
That's an interesting call, and I thought immediately when I heard that he did get signed, of your film room stuff, talking about his deficiencies in run defense. We started talking about this way back when, actually at the draft, it was up as to whether Chris Jones was, going to be part of a trade package. Were they going to resign him? Were they going to let him go? And we had our good friend Craig on, who works for Arrowhead Pride, and Craig had his thoughts about it. He wasn't exactly sure. He wasn't sure, just like most people, that the Chiefs were going to be able to find the money, because there's a lot of money. They got money tied up in Frank Clark. Everybody knew that the Mahomes deal was looming, and there's just only so many buckets, but the salary cap is a bit of a myth, and they found a way to make it work. Jones for $21.25 per year. The real number there is the guaranteed money, $60 million to sign, right? If he signs, which he did, he gets $60 million. So he will get 60 of the 85 guaranteed. That's big dollars. So I think the Chiefs understand the role that he plays in their defense, and that pressure, that penetration that he is so good at, that he is one of the very best in the NFL at. I think they really want that. That is the way to disrupt not just the zone run game you were talking about, but the quick passing game as well. Interior penetration by big guys who are quick, and Jones is all of that, is a way to really get people off their game when you're not necessarily going to collect a ton of sacks because of the quick passing game. So they think he's worth it. I think it's a little bit rich on the deal. But again, guys like this don't grow on trees. Jim Nagy, the Senior Bowl director, came out and said, this is why teams bet on guys with big-time physical skills who aren't finished products yet. This is why NFL teams go, because if you win, you get a Chris Jones.
Yep.
Right? It's worth rolling the dice because you get a disruptor who is rare, and he is definitely that. He is a rare disruptive force. Now, you have to build the balance of the team. You can't run Mahomes out on offense and Chris Jones and Frank Clark out on defense and expect to win. You got to surround them with talent as well. Now, Brett Veach has decided that he can do that. He certainly has the areas he pays and the areas he doesn't pay, just like other GMs. We'll see how it balances out over time. I think it's a lot of money to tie up, but at the same time, they did tie it up in a guy that is not what I would call street replaceable in any way. You're not just going to wander out and find some bargain bin Chris Jones. Like Chris Jones, he has a rare skill set. He knew it. He pushed him. And he got paid. So good for him. Hopefully very good for the Chiefs. Hopefully they're right and he continues to produce at that level and really is that cog in their defense. We'll see. It's a lot of money to tie up on the D-line for sure.
Also keep in mind the rest of their defensive tackle core, who I think do kind of make up for his deficiencies a little bit. Derek Nottie, Mike Pennell, Colin Saunders. I think they're all better two-gappers than he is. They're all making basically no money. Like, they're all dirt cheap. So it kind of balances out.
Yeah, that's the other side of the coin, right? Is that skill set that you're talking about, that run stopping, two gapping, plugger, defensive tackle. Those are guys you get in the 4th and 5th round. We saw this year, we saw a bunch of those guys go undrafted free agent, right? We highlighted a bunch of them in our UDFA episode. Yeah, Miami took one, to go with the guy
Benito
they drafted.
Jones. Yeah, Benito.
Right? Big, solid dudes that can control two gaps and make sure that people don't run at them. That is a much more replaceable skill set, as evidenced by the fact that people are picking them literally off the street, undrafted free agents. You're not going to get a big, strong, flashy penetrator like Chris Jones on the interior very often or ever. So that's what the Chiefs paid for, and hopefully he stays healthy because he's a fun player to watch when he's healthy, and he is doing what he does best, getting in the backfield and wrecking stuff. So I hope it pans out for everybody. I always hope it pans out for everybody, but it is a big gamble. It's a lot of money tied up in one spot.
I don't want to say he's replaceable, but his position group overall is replaceable, so it's kind of the exact opposite of Chris Jones, and that's Derrick Henry at running back. We always talk about interior penetrators don't grow on trees. Well, running backs, if there's one thing in the NFL that does grow on trees, it's running back. And so I was kind of surprised to see the Titans give him $12 million a year, and we've talked about it on the show before, and it's a philosophy that Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks over on Move the Sticks have talked about multiple times too, of it's fine to draft a running back high, just don't pay him a second contract. And the Titans drafted Derrick Henry, I think of the top 50 picks, minimum he was a second round pick, and then they paid him. So it kind of goes against that philosophy. As unique as Derrick Henry is, I don't necessarily think he is unique enough for me to justify giving him a big second contract. I know it's still only 75% of what Christian McCaffrey's making, but does Derrick Henry provide 75% of the value of Christian McCaffrey? I'm not 100% sure he does. Again, he's the heart and soul of that system last year, but I don't necessarily think he's the reason why that system worked. I think you can throw a Darrington Evans in there and still be productive. I think you can throw really a lot of the rookie running backs this year if the Titans drafted them and still be productive. And I would almost rather use that $12 million on another position group. And again, that's nothing against Derrick Henry. He's a great running back. But guys like Christian McCaffrey, I'm willing to pay because I think they are very unique. Saquon Barkley, very unique. Alvin Kamara, unique. But there's not a whole lot of those guys in,
you
in
keep
the
using
league.
that word. I haven't gone on my rant about unique. I probably should.
What is your rant? I'm curious.
My rant, and damn the English teacher that told me this, and they're absolutely right. Unique is a superlative. You either are unique or you're not.
Yes.
It's like being dead. And we as a people always throw a word in before unique. Mostly unique, pretty unique. You can't be mostly unique or pretty unique. You're either unique or you're not.
Well, is Derrick Henry...
Is he rare?
Is Derrick Henry unique? I think he's great.
I think he's great too. And again, this is nothing. This is a semantic rant against unique, not against Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is really big, really fast, and a skilled running back. He is a very skilled runner. He is not as effective as a guy like Christian McCaffrey, since you brought him up, in the passing game.
Yes.
The balance to Derrick Henry's game is not there. Now, he didn't get paid what CMC got paid, but it is $25.5 million guaranteed. So basically half of that money, the contract terms, if you're looking at it, it's 4 years, $50 million. He gets just over half of that guaranteed. So he will see that money. $12.5 million a year is a lot to pay a running back who does not contribute in the passing game. Period. Stop. End of story. Is Derrick Henry a really good runner, and was he a huge part of that offense? Yes. The thing that I resonate to that you said right at the end is, I don't know that, paraphrasing, he was the straw that stirred the drink, right? The reason they were great is balance, right? Tannehill did what he needed to do, and Derrick Henry did what he needed to do, and Mike Vrabel's built that squad to be a power running squad. The offensive line is very talented and built for a purpose, right? To open big holes for runners that Derrick Henry especially can exploit, right? Because he's huge, he's powerful, but the thing that makes Henry approach being unique is the speed at that size.
You know who else is 250 pounds, jumps 41 inches, runs 4.53, and in a very similar system, mind you, and as of this year is making 48 times less money than Derrick Henry?
48 times less.
A.J. Dillon,
I
rookie
know.
running back for the Packers,
Yeah.
same physical profile, productive in college, 48 times cheaper. He's making $350,000 a year.
Yeah.
Times
and
that by
he's,
48, that's $12 million. Again, Derrick Henry, good running back, not unique. I'm not paying that much.
And how much of his, again, if we're talking about superlatives, I think Henry's better, and I thought Henry was better coming out than I thought A.J. Dillon was, by a round or two. Is that
but is
worth,
he 48 times better?
Right. Is that 50 times better money-wise? And my answer, if I'm a GM, is nah.
No.
Right? So if I get A.J. Dillon and he comes in and he produces, let's just say 70%, has a good season, that would still be a very good season if you look at Derrick Henry's stats from last year. He had a monster year. But if, A.J. Dillon comes in and gets 70% of that production for 1/50th of the price, that's how you build your team. Or at least that's how I build my team. Let me be very specific that I'm sitting here doing a podcast and they're getting paid to win football games. So it's a little bit different, but it is a gamble on a position that we've seen over and over again can be had for much lower cost.
It's the only position, again, unless it is a crazy, multifaceted, highly versatile talent that can be used on all four downs. Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, maybe Joe Mixon, and that's a hard maybe. Like there's like 4 or 5 of them in the league at most. And that's a maybe. It's still a debate on if I would pay Alvin Kamara. Like, it's still a debate on if I would pay Saquon. Again, it depends on if he can stay healthy. Like, Christian McCaffrey, I agree with that deal because there's one of Christian McCaffrey. But
yeah.
Derrick Henry, there's not one of him.
Yeah.
He's a great running back, but there's not one of him. There's not only one guy that can do what Derrick Henry can do. And so I'm not paying him $12 million a year. It's economics. That's what it is. Love the player, but it's economics. In a salary cap era where I've got to decide, hey, am I paying a good guard or am I paying a great running back? I'm going to take the good guard every time because the good guard impacts my offensive success a lot more than a great running back does. It just that's how it is. And it sucks for running backs because it means that they're the most disposable position, despite being probably one of the most prone to be injured. But that's unfortunate. That's the nature of the beast. And I disagree with the signing for that reason. Again, it has nothing to do with Derrick Henry as a player. It's just economics.
And I know we said we were going to talk about the draft, but next year's loaded. There's, 2 backs that didn't come out this year that could have gone in the top 2 rounds, most likely, if they had. They're most likely going to come out next year, and the rest of the class looks pretty good at running back as well. Next year's free agent class in the NFL for running backs is large and very skilled. So good on Derrick Henry for getting his money before all that hits, but woe be you if you're running back looking for money next year, because there's going to be a ton of options in the draft. There's a ton of options in free agency. Your leverage is basically nil. You've got none.
Mm-hmm. Oh God, I don't know. I'm never gonna understand it. So let's just talk about Dak because
Speaking of things you don't understand.
Speaking of things I don't understand. Okay, there's 2 schools of thought here, and it's you pay what the market rate is for a quarterback no matter what, because you don't want to dive back in and try to get a new one, which I totally understand. There's another school of thought, which I think I subscribe to a little bit more, which is if you're paying elite money to a quarterback who's not elite, a quarterback who I think requires more of a supporting cast to have the same results, and you're taking away the resources that you need to build that supporting cast long term, it hurts your team more than helps it. And so I understand it, but I don't understand it, in that I understand why Dallas has been hesitant to give Dak the deal that he wants. And again, it seems to be more about years than money. And I think the reason why they've been hesitant to give is because they kind of wanted a reason to have this deal not get done, because I think they really wanted to see another year. I think if they really wanted Dak that bad, they would have caved on the 4 years versus 5, and he would be signed. I think this is, I don't want to say an excuse, but it's a quote-unquote acceptable reason of why they let this deadline lapse, why they didn't sign him long-term. I think they want to see one more year to be absolutely sure that they want to pay him, I guess seemingly now, over $35 million a year, because that is going to have consequences for the rest of the roster, believe me. And I agree with that decision. But at the same time, I also don't understand the messaging behind it, because they keep saying over and over again, he's the quarterback of the future, he's the quarterback of the future, we're committed to Dak, there's no other option, and then they let it go. So it's like they're saying one thing and doing another. Like, if you're not sure, stop blowing smoke up everybody's ass. Like, just say, like, hey, we have this view.
I'm sorry. I'm a Bears fan. I'm just chuckling because that is Ryan Pace's MO. Mitchell Trubisky is our quarterback, right? Mitchell Trubisky is the starter. Well, you're going to go out and trade a pick and spend big money on Nick Foles or a lot bigger money than his contemporaries got, right? And keep saying, no, Mitch is our guy. And Bears fans are, we're a little bit jaded to that now. We're like, oh, yeah, whatever. Foles is going to start. So I'm used to that blowing smoke. And I'm with you. It'd be great if GMs or organizations didn't do it, but they do, and that's part of the game. But I'm going to take what you said about Dak in terms of wanting to see one more year and flip it around more to the organization than to Dak. I think people know what Dak Prescott is as a player, and I don't think that they really want to assess so much what he can do, but it seems to go, I don't know, not unreported because it's Dallas after all. There's lots of reporting that goes around the Cowboys, but look, they've got a brand new coaching staff, right? They have an entirely new regime. They pretty much, for the most part, cleaned house, right? Mike McCarthy's there now, right? That's not the same system that Jason Garrett ran, which is there's probably lots of Cowboys fans saying, and that's a good thing.
Well, they did keep their OC.
They kept their OC, but how that works when he brings when a new head coach comes in, he is not going to be hands off, right? Especially Mike McCarthy, who's an offensively based head coach, right? He's not going to come in and go, oh yeah, do all the same stuff. Like, I won't touch it at all. You just do your thing, and I'll check in once a week and make sure you got a game plan. Like, that's not happening, right? It's going to be a change. There are going to be changes. And he's going to be trying to do what hopefully all good coaches do, which is maximize their player strengths. And he's watched all of Dak's tape, probably every snap that he's thrown for the past couple of years, I would imagine. And he thinks he's got a really good idea. Now, that may work, and it may not, but it's a big change. And Dak may ascend. We may see greater heights out of him, or he may regress. And if I'm the Cowboys, I'm hedging my bets to see which one happens, not based on Dak's talent, but just based on overall fit, on scheme, on how McCarthy does, on how that relationship goes, whether or not they have success, right? I'm not going to book it this year for another 5 years and then have it go south in year one after a major change.
Yeah, I think if they really, Jerry's a deal maker. If they really wanted the deal to get done, 4 years versus 5 years, they would have caved. They would have made it happen. If they were that committed of saying, like, look, Dak's our guy.
I agree with you 100%. If he's your guy and you've got him in hand, you're going to pay him.
And so what I don't understand is, like, okay, if you're not sure, stop telling us you're sure. You're clearly not. Just don't say anything. Don't say anything. They didn't have negotiations for months.
Yeah.
If they really wanted the deal to happen, they would have made it happen. So just stop pretending like you want, like, just let it go. Like, let him play on this year, and then you can go back to the table. And guess what? If he plays great again, and the team has more success, then it's worth the extra money.
Sure.
It is. In the end, it's $5 extra million you're going to have to pay a year. Who cares? At least then you're sure. And at least then you can say you're sure, and you can actually do the damn deal. I don't know. I just the double messaging coming out, it's been so infuriating for me to watch. And this is, totally different than the arguments against Dak because, like, statistically speaking, I did an episode on it. how much is he worth? He's a good quarterback. Like, I'm not denying that. He's a good quarterback. Yeah. He's not an elite quarterback. But good quarterbacks that get paid elite money don't usually win the Super Bowl, and they actually go to the playoffs less than teams that are starting rookie contracts. Like, over the last 10 years since 2011 when the new CBA hit, like, the number of teams with a quarterback with a top 10 cap hit that go to the playoffs, on average, there's less of them than teams that are starting dirt cheap rookies or just dirt cheap veterans, period. So
yeah, that's been the model. I mean, it's certainly been the model that you can, as the window is, get somebody, whether it's from outside or from the draft, from free agency or from the draft, and use those, really that 3-year window to get to load up as hard as you can and make a run. Because when you have to pay the quarterback, and look, quarterbacks are expensive, we all know it. And when you have to pay the quarterback, your chances of building a team that complete go way down. So that's been the sort of, it seems like a lot of teams in the NFL have been on that path. Seattle was on that path with Russell Wilson before they paid him. LA was trying to do that, before they dropped big money on Goff, which seems we could talk about that for a while. But that's the thing, right? Get the rookie starter, use the window when they're cost controlled. Chicago set up to do the same thing. Didn't work out for them. Houston's going to be in the same boat here pretty soon, right? We're going to see Deshaun Watson get paid, and they're going to have a different financial set of straits to navigate. So, it's interesting.
Since 2011, you know who the only two teams to win a Super Bowl with a quarterback with a top 10 cap hit were?
No.
It's the 2011 Giants with Eli, who's an enigma in his own right and defies all statistics over the course of his career. Like,
it's Eli.
It's a good quarterback that gets hot at the right time.
Yeah,
and it's Eli. Like, it happens. And it was against the Patriots. Like, it's Eli. Like, those two Giants teams were statistical outliers in almost every single way. Like, that was the team that was last in rushing but still won the Super Bowl. Like, it's crazy. Like, anyway. And then the other one was the Broncos with the corpse of Peyton Manning, who had an absolutely loaded roster around him with Von Miller still on his rookie deal, Chris Harris still on his rookie deal, Aqib Talib in his prime, CJ Anderson, who was making basically no money. Like, that was a loaded roster with dirt cheap talent at other positions around quarterback because they hit on a lot of draft picks. And similar thing happened to Dallas. They hit on a lot of draft picks that were dirt cheap because keep in mind, when Dak was drafted, they were up against the cap when he was drafted because they had the Romo deal in the books. They had the Dez deal in the books. Like, they had no money, but they hit on a lot of draft picks. They hit on Dak. They hit on Zeke. They hit on Byron Jones. They hit on Jalen. They hit on Tank Lawrence, the offensive line, who at the time I think they had only paid two of them, and then they ended up having to pay a couple more deals. They hit on some DBs in the mid rounds, Jordan Lewis. Who's the other corner? Chidobe Awuzie. Like, they didn't draft a lot of outright busts. And so everybody was dirt cheap. It let them kind of get out from under their really bad contracts and still be a successful team. They had a few really good years, even with Jason Garrett as a head coach. And now all of their draft picks have come due to get paid. They're all getting paid. They have no money. A couple years from now, they're projected to have bottom 3 in projected cap space for like 3 years in a row. I don't know what the hell they're going to do. And they still haven't paid their quarterback. So I don't. And people are saying, well, the salary cap doesn't exist, like, really, which, yeah, that's true. But at the same time, when you're paying like 9 guys over $10 million, soon to be 10, like, that salary cap being fungible or not, that's still a hell of a lot of money, and you still got to field 53 guys on this roster. The math
it's going to get real thin, and they're going to get real interested in the UDFA market because all that, and your biggest point, they still haven't paid their quarterback, right? If it looks like that and you have paid your quarterback, that's expected. If you do not have stability past this year at the quarterback position, and maybe they think they're going to roll with Andy Dalton, who knows? Like
the Chiefs are going to have to go through the same thing because they have also no money.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys make a lot of money. You know what the difference is? They got Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid. So they can still they can still throw trash cans out there and be fine. I can't say the same thing about Dallas.
No, because very few people are Mahomes, if anyone, and Dak is certainly not. He's a very talented guy, but he does need to have some talent around him, and they still haven't signed him. That's the thing, is those projected cap numbers you mentioned are without a quarterback deal on the books. So what are you going to do at the game's most important position right now? It's an open question mark, and it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out in Dallas because they're going to have to make some tough choices. Imaginary salary cap or not, they're going to be right up against it because quarterbacks aren't cheap. Unless they get lucky again. And boy, organizations that count on that, getting a 3rd or 4th round quarterback who plays like Russell or Dak, the numbers say that is a terrible bet, right?
Yeah.
It happens very, very, very rarely. And if you're thinking, hey, that's my magic key to success is I'll just get another one of these guys, Dallas being lucky enough to have done it once, probably not, just based on numbers. So let's talk about some of the other guys that didn't get paid, like Dak, who didn't get paid. And I'll just read through the list, and then we'll pick out some highlights. We're not going to go into depth on all of them, but Cincinnati, A.J. Green, Denver, Justin Simmons, Jacksonville, Yannick Ngakoue, New England, Joe Tunney, Washington, Brandon Scherf, L.A. Chargers, Hunter Henry, Pittsburgh, Bud Dupree, New York Giants, Leonard Williams. Ugh,
Yikes.
don't get me started on Gettleman. Minnesota's Anthony Harris, the safety. Baltimore's Matthew Judon, and Tampa Bay, Shaq Barrett. So who out of that list stands out? We'll cover some of these guys, but anybody really ring your bell as they should have or really glad they didn't?
So the Shaq Barrett thing is a little bit confusing to me because he's a really, really good pass rusher. He was a good pass rusher in Denver, and he was still a great pass rusher in Tampa, except getting a larger share of snaps, so he was able to put up 19 and a half sacks because he was finally a full-time starter that could really put his talents to use. I did a film room episode on him, how he got 9 sacks in the first 4 weeks, and just how, even though he's not the most physically gifted guy, how creative he is as a rusher, how technically sound he is. Really, really good player. And on some level, I kind of get it because they were last in cap space this year. They only have $4.8 million. But when you look at next year, they have, let's see, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Their top 10 in available cap space next year was $63 million. Their top, 8 in 2022. Actually, no, it's top 5 in 2022 with $163 million available. They have a lot of contracts coming off the books. Probably also Tom Brady by that point too. So like they have a lot of room to backload a deal for clearly a great pass rusher, which again, in the vein of Chris Jones, those don't grow on trees. Even if he's not the most complete player, it's hard to find a great edge rusher, and they found one. They got one last year. And I don't understand their reasoning for not extending him, because now he's going to hit the market next year and inevitably going to get paid by somebody just because he's that damn good. And edge rusher is just a hard position to find. And not to mention, I think they should have signed him before the Myles Garrett deal, because I think you could have got him for like 18 a year before. And now that Myles Garrett got 25, he's going to want at least 20, especially if he has another good year this year. That price is only going to go up. So I don't know. That was a little bit of a mismanagement to me because they had the money available. They could easily have backloaded that contract, and he just plays a premium position. So I don't know. I don't get that decision to not sign him long term.
Yeah, one we're both happier about in the not category is Leonard Williams, which I alluded to that as I read through the list, but neither of us are Dave Gettleman fans. We were having a text exchange about that this week. Surprise, surprise. And I said, Dave Gettleman has blown more chances than most people get. And you said, yeah, with 2 organizations. And that's true. And again, speaking of mismanagement, the way he acquired Leonard Williams and then set up the Giants to have to pay him, not great. Not surprising after Leonard Williams' play or lack thereof that the Giants didn't pick it up and pay him. And as I look through the rest of the list, Justin Simmons, I'm really actually pretty surprised that Denver didn't pick up the ticket there. Again, lots of your arguments for Shaq Barrett apply for Justin Simmons, although it's a different position. And maybe that's it. It's positional value. It's safety. But Justin Simmons, very heady safety. Really liked him coming out of Boston College. Has played extremely well. Solidified that. Well, not just solidified. Played it at an extremely high level in Denver. Definitely in the top 10 safeties in the league in terms of production. And maybe they just don't want to tie up money in the defensive backfield. But again, as a player who has impact and has kind of done everything you want, fits your system, has been very dependable. I don't know why you don't.
And, it's the same kind of thing. It's the same kind of thing, too. Because I mentioned the Bucks having the 10th most available cap space next year. The Broncos are 11th. They got $55 million next year, and then they got the 6th most the year after that, right behind the Buccaneers as well. Again, with $162 million available. So they have the money. I don't.
And the cap number for a safety is a lot lower than the cap number for an edge rusher. So
it's 15, again, when you have $16 million at most.
Yeah, you have a quality guy there. I'm not sure why you wouldn't pay him. Just the reasoning there, not as easy as somebody like AJ Green, who's aging, and Cincinnati's looking to reload with their current roster. AJ Green, again, very good player. Are you going to pay him, massive amounts of dollars for a long term at this point in his career? Probably not. Yannick has very noted struggles with Jacksonville's leadership, ownership. Wants out very, very badly, has been extremely vocal about that. I can see why they wouldn't sign him long term, but they are going to sort of hold the asset and try and trade him for sure. There's been suitors even this week. Again, no deal. Basically, what's been reported at least is that Jacksonville hasn't felt that the return on the investment is worth it, that it was a balanced deal, right? They were getting a good player maybe from another team in a draft pick, but not a great player. And look, Yannick's been a great player. So, interesting situation to watch. He could still be moved, but I understand why they didn't pay him the money. Joe Tunney, I thought they'd pay him the money, and they didn't. That's a little odd to me, but it's very hard to... I know it's very hard to argue with Belichick and when he either pays or doesn't, because, man, his hit rate on that is pretty much the best in the NFL in terms of letting guys go, maybe a year too early, but never a year too late, and that's the way you want to be biased. And he's so good at it. So if, he thinks that Joe Tunney can be replaced for cheap, and, we talked about guards, that sweet spot of 3rd, 4th, 5th round picks. Look, a 3rd, 4th, 5th round pick is probably going to be able to give you, especially in the Patriot system, maybe 70 or 80% of Joe Tunney, and again, probably 1/20th of the money that you would end up paying him on a big extension. So I kind of get it, but I still thought they'd pay him. Anthony Harris, a player that played really, really well, safety in Minnesota, but they've got a ton of money tied up in their other safety, and I understand not wanting to tie up that much money in a non-quote-unquote premium position. But Anthony Harris has done everything and more that Minnesota could have asked of him. Just kind of fits in as, unfortunately, he got there second in terms of the safeties, and he's not going to get money from Minnesota. He's going to get money from somebody. He'll play on the franchise tag this year, but when he comes up, he's going to be arguably the preeminent free agent, one of the preeminent free agent safeties available. So he'll get his bag.
I don't think they're going to sign him because by 2022, they're projected to have the 3rd lowest cap. They only got $63 million projected to be on the books by then. Yep. And they got Harrison Smith coming up as a free agent again that year. They got Mike Hughes coming up. They got Brian O'Neill, who's been a great right tackle for them. They're going to have to pay him too. And that's just 3 guys alone.
And you talked about these, they might at that point be having to think about Cousins if they want to keep him longer term. And
I think his deal expires. His deal expires, I think, the next year in 2023. So they're going to have to, they don't have the money. Yeah, they don't have the money for it.
Yeah, so. Nothing to do with the player. He's been fantastic. I'll be happy if he leaves the division. I hate him that much. But just an unfortunate situation for him in Minnesota that he's just not going to get paid because of, again, structure. Baltimore's Matthew Judon, big name in terms of the trade. Even before the draft, is he going to get traded? Are they going to sign him? Are they going to re-sign him? Are they going to shop him? And we were talking a little bit about this before the show, that Baltimore pass rushers, in terms of value, if we want to talk about value as a player in a system, I think he has more value staying in Baltimore, but he has way more monetary value if he leaves.
Yes.
Right?
100%.
Somebody else is going to pay him a lot more because Baltimore, again, cranks these guys out, and typically when they leave, they get big dollars and they do not enjoy as much professional success as they had when they were in Baltimore as a member of that defense. And I tend to think Matthew Judon probably lines up along those lines. Again, good player, great contributions, is going to get paid more elsewhere, and Baltimore's just happy to let him play out one more year. They'd like to get something for him in return, but they're not going to shop him out for pennies. So, if it comes to that, they'll just keep him and play him.
The Colts are going to give him an absolute metric ton of money next year because the Colts have $113 million available, even with the Buckner deal on the books.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a lot of. You put Judon and Buckner on the defense, quote unquote defensive line, and whew. Yeah,
it's going to be either them or the Seahawks because the Seahawks got a ton of money available too. So I don't know. I can understand why they didn't pay him, but
sure.
If Garrett got 25, he's going to get 20, and I can understand Baltimore thinking ahead. Hey, we're going to have to pay Humphrey. We're going to have to pay Lamar. Somebody's got to take the bullet. It might as well be a position that historically we've been able to find mid-round guys and crank them out. Like he's the guy that got tagged in Duck Duck Goose, to say the least. But also keep in mind, COVID is going to be impacting the salary cap too, and so a lot of teams are kind of like, maybe we shouldn't commit right now because we don't know what's going to happen with the salary cap. Some people have projected it might take a $40 million dip. So, again, I don't really know exactly what's going to happen with it. Everybody's speculating, but the one consensus is the cap will be affected by COVID. A lot of things are going to be affected by COVID, so we might as well just kind of round out the show talking about it.
Let's speculate. Yeah. Let's jump on the bus of speculators at this point.
Yeah, let's start with college because I think college is the one that I think you and I are most in agreement with is not going to happen. There's a multitude of reasons. It kind of seems like we've gotten this slow trickle of, okay, these guys are not practicing because they keep testing positive. Okay, we're not going to have camp. Some schools are only going to be doing online. Some schools aren't. And now we're seeing conferences do only conference schedule. And some teams are waiting until later in the month to decide if they're going to do only conference schedule. Notre Dame is probably freaking out at this point because they don't know what the hell they're going to do. If they're only going to be able to play ACC teams, if they're not going to be able to play, Stanford or USC, since the Pac-12 is only doing conference football, they're trying to figure that out. They're going to lose millions no matter what. And I think all of this confusion without any sort of centralized decision maker like in the NFL is going to hurt their ability to have a season. Not to mention the fact that they can't do a bubble like the NBA or baseball was proposing, and they have almost zero way to isolate the players like the NFL theoretically does because they're student athletes. They got to go to class. At least some of them are going to have to go to class if they're at a campus where they are going to do in-person classes, like, say, Notre Dame. Or even if they're doing mostly online, all it takes is one backup kicker going to a civil engineering lab where somebody's asymptomatic and the whole team gets shut down. And then what do you do? Like, it is so much harder to guarantee safety in a college environment compared to the pro environment. And there's also just a hell of a lot more people in college football. The rosters are bigger. There's more schools. There's more programs. I mean, we're talking about thousands upon thousands of kids and coaches. And not to be super morbid here, but if the death rate holds, if all of these teams play, statistically, somebody is going to die. Somebody will die. And I don't know if it'll be a coach. I don't know if it'll be a player. Somebody's going to die. There's so many people. And if so many people get infected, it's going to kill somebody. And I hope that they are ready to accept that. Of if we press forward and have a season, we're killing somebody. Statistically,
yeah.
there's way too many people.
I hope they're not ready to accept that, quite frankly, because I tweeted out the slow. Yeah, I tweeted out the slow drip thing. It's become really evident, especially in the last 2 months. 2 months ago, I think the outlook was a little bit different as we've watched sort of how the whole country has reacted to the pandemic. It's become really, really clear that the discipline required on multiple fronts to confront this, control it. If you want to say something like beat it, that's probably a little bit over ambitious. But in order to have something like a college football season, everybody needs to get on board and say, all right, we're all here to protect each other. We're going to do everything necessary, which is masks and testing, and we're going to get this thing completely as controlled as we can get it. And then we would be lucky enough to have something like a college football season. Look, I'm going to miss it as much as anybody. But even a couple of months ago, people starting to have, basically like spring football. And immediately, after being open for just a couple of days, every program that did it started to report COVID cases and had to shut it down. And it was so predictable. And schools are still doing it. I saw one 2 weeks ago. Oh, we opened up our football program and we had to shut it down because a bunch of guys got COVID. I'm like, it doesn't take a scientist, it doesn't take an epidemiologist to know that if you put people in close proximity and you work them out really hard and they have to be near each other like they do in football, it's the nature of the sport. Think about every contact photo of college football or pro football that you've ever seen, right? It's two very large guys face to face who have been running and sweating for at least the last half an hour right in each other's mugs. Think about offensive and defensive line play, 300-pound guys slamming into each other, pushing, shoving, breathing. It's just a blender for germs. There's no way to socially distance football. It's just not structurally possible. I mean, baseball had the best shot. You mentioned baseball. Like, baseball is literally socially distant. The closest is the batter to the catcher, right? And maybe a first baseman standing next to somebody on first base. But other than that, you got good space and you're outdoors, right? You got a really good shot. Football is the opposite. There is no way to guarantee safety physically for football players. And I do say football players, not college football players, because we're going to get to that. But anybody that's even done spring drills has had to shut it down because of COVID cases. So this conference-only idea isn't any better. Oh, we're only going to play other schools who are in our conference. There's still other schools, right? And we talked about this before the show as well. State guidelines are going to really determine whether or not that's even possible to occur.
Yeah.
We have, multiple schools in multiple states and they all have different rules. And, let's just say we're talking about the Pac-12 and Arizona, which is one of the states that opened first and had the hugest resurgence of cases. If they go hardcore to try and, save their people and save their economy and say, forget it, no mass gatherings, you either have to move the game to outside the state, but are they going to allow people to travel and do that and come back? Like, there's just so many logistical hurdles. I really don't think we're going to see a college football season, or we're going to see about 3 weeks of one. And I say that because although the rosters are much larger, we were seeing up to about 10%. Alabama was 10%. Clemson was a little bit more than 10% of players involved in even their spring practices testing positive for COVID. And if you want to talk about 10% of your squad every week in a non-drill environment, like a full contact environment, it seems like it might even be higher. But let's just go with the 10% figure. 10% of your roster gets infected with COVID every week, regardless of the long-term health implications that you talked about when we opened this segment. You got to put those guys in quarantine for 2 weeks, right? They're not available. So your roster depreciates by 10% every week and doesn't replenish for at least 2 weeks if people are well enough to play and they want to play again. That's the other thing, right? There's going to be desire and people opting out. And by week 4 or 5, you don't have enough players. You just don't have enough players. People are like, oh, I'll separate the first string and the second string quarterback. That'll do it. And I'm like, no, that won't do it. If you lose 4/5 of your offensive line in the first 3 weeks, what are you going to do? Like, physically, how are you going to play? And that's the least of anybody's concerns. But when you start thinking about it, just extrapolating numbers from spring drills to actual contact games, it's not possible. It's not going to happen.
And just from a safety standpoint, I get in the college D1 athlete demographic, incredibly in shape young people. Statistically, very unlikely that any of them would die to COVID. But they can have long-term health effects that are not death, particularly to their lungs, and it could ruin careers. Like, we have seen data that shows even if you don't die from COVID, you can have long-term damage. Secondly, even though players, somebody in that demographic statistically are less susceptible, a lot of coaches are older, out-of-shape people. Like, the whole, 65-year-old college coach with a beer gut, there's a lot of those around the country. And those are the type of people that are very, very susceptible. And if they're hanging out with a bunch of players that are getting COVID and they're in close proximity with them in meeting rooms and everything like that, like, what's it worth? What is the college season worth? Because if one of these coaches dies and their family has to bury them, is that worth it? That is a question that football fans need to ask themselves. What is more important? That everybody is safe and stays alive for next year? Not just players, but coaches too. Even though they're older, they deserve to live too. What is worth it? To me, I'm okay with not having a college season if that means that everybody's alive for the next college season. And it's a question that everybody's going to have to ask themselves individually. And to me, I've already answered it for me. But everybody else is going to have to ask it for themselves. And also keep in mind, these players aren't actually making money to put themselves at risk, unlike NFL players, which I think is a different conversation because they are making money. And I think they are in a position in life where they can make that choice freely, where college players probably can't. And I do want to kind of talk about the NFL by phrasing it with J.J. Watt's tweet, expressing frustrations about a lack of communication between players in the league in terms of setting things up for procedures and everything. I'll read this tweet out for you. He said, "In the interest of having everyone on the same page in terms of what we know and don't know at this time, here are a few things I've learned being on the 4 NFLPA calls in the last 2 weeks with hundreds of other players. Keep in mind that our rookies are scheduled to report in 48 hours. He's referring to the Texans, who they're actually reporting on Monday. They were given clearance today to do that. So he said, here's what we know and what we don't know. We want to play. We want to be as safe as possible. We have not received a single valid IDER plan, which is Infectious Disease Emergency Response, from any team or the league. We don't know if there are any preseason games or not. We don't know if there would be a daily testing, semi-daily testing, or anything of the sort. We don't know how a potential positive COVID test would affect contracts, roster spots, etc. Because, and just to provide a little clarification on that, they don't know if that means it's going to be designated as a football injury or non-football injury, which, again, the teams can treat that differently in terms of contracts. So if it's designated as non-football injury, that means teams wouldn't have to pay them, which is a huge thing. That's a huge contention among players in the league right now. He continues, nothing has been agreed upon regarding what training camp will actually look like and how the ramp-up, quote-unquote, period will work. And finally, we want to play. So again, this is a different situation than college because these guys are actually paid for their services, and they're also grown adults that can make their own decisions. But he also highlights the fact that there's not really been a plan put in place despite camp starting next week for a lot of teams, and they still don't know what the hell it's going to look like. I'm in the same boat with college. I don't think it's going to happen on time. I don't see how it's possible to happen on time if they don't even have a plan.
Yeah, and I'll get back to, the money's one thing, and grown adults, I would say that most college, a lot of college players are grown adults too. Many of them have families already. They're making their own decisions. That stuff, regardless, you get back to the physical, right? Certainly there's more at stake for NFL players. They are being paid. It is their job. You can look at it as a return to work situation if you want to. The issue brought up about whether it's going to be considered a football injury or non-football injury is, extremely contentious and a major point of this. But the bottom line is the physical nature of the game that I talked about in college doesn't change, right? You have big, strong guys exercising at a very high rate, breathing very heavily, Look, in the trenches, you are sharing sweat and snot and spit and blood and everything else. It is an extremely contact-heavy environment, and there is no way with a virus that travels the way COVID does to say, oh, we'll make sure that we cut down on that or that you won't get it. The bottom line is, if somebody out there has it or has gotten it or is carrying it and is asymptomatic, doesn't matter. They're going to spread it to other players. And, they're going to spread it to coaches and trainers and whoever's in the bubble or their families or the umps or whoever. I mean, it's a very infectious disease. It's a pandemic for a reason. And the physical nature of the game is not going to change. And we've seen some silly stuff out there. Hey, what about, helmets that encompass your entire head? Anybody that's ever played football realizes that that's a terrible idea. You're going to cook somebody's brain. Venting is the thing they're always looking for more of, not sealing it up. And there isn't a way to do that. There isn't a way to seal it up, right? And without that, we don't even have base logistics. I mean, based on Watt's tweet, we don't even know what the testing plan is going to be. We've already heard Major League Baseball players complaining that what was promised for them in the testing plan has not been delivered in terms of time and turnaround. They were talking about a 48-hour turnaround in Major League Baseball. There's a tweet from one of the front offices 7 days after the first round of testing saying we still haven't seen it. That means 5 more days that somebody that tests positive is spreading that disease to, again, the coach, the support staff, the opposing players. If the NFL doesn't have this figured out and rookies are supposed to report in a matter of days, it's a lot of logistics to work out team-wide. Again, state regulations about what's allowed and what's not. There's just a ton of moving parts and not a ton of time. So in terms of starting the season on time, I am not hopeful. And in terms of completing the season, again, a couple of months ago, I said, look, the NFL has near unlimited resources. They're incredibly good at handling large, complex logistical things like moving entire games and series of games because of hurricanes, changing venues in natural disasters. They have a ton of experience doing things like this. The fact that there aren't plans in place already give me serious pause that we're going to see an NFL season that looks anything like a normal NFL season.
And I let's just say we do have a season. Let's go with the optimistic scenario that we have a season. There's no way that this year doesn't have an asterisk on it, because all it takes is a franchise quarterback testing positive a week before the Super Bowl. Guess what? He can't play. Let's say the Chiefs go back-to-back, they make it to the Super Bowl again, Pat Mahomes tests positive. You're throwing in Matt Moore in the Super Bowl? How do you bet on games this year? Or at least long term, like week to week you can bet on games. But how is anybody
it's
placing
no
a bet?
different.
I'm
terrible at betting on games.
I'll bet week to week, but I'm not betting season long this year. Hell no. You can't.
The ripple effect through everything, through betting, through every enterprise, fantasy. Fantasy is a multi-billion-dollar a year industry, right? And folks I know that are fantasy professionals, right? Because there are those, lots of them now. And they're like, I'm going through my, 7th keeper draft, and it just feels like it's completely nihilistic, right? It just feels like I'm putting one foot in front of the other because these guys aren't going to play anyways, right? Yeah. They're saying that and have been saying that for the past couple of weeks, not to mention what we're hearing from a lot of media colleagues, right, there is an overarching sense of dread, right? If there's not going to be an NFL season, if that's going to occur, do you think they're going to keep those journalists employed for really 14 months, right, until they would be doing this again? There is a lot of very real concern and ripples throughout multiple industries that the NFL touches, because the NFL is, it's the United States' darling, right? It is the preeminent sports league. It is the biggest money contributor in terms of professional sports. Probably the largest gambling driver, I would imagine. It has far-reaching impact. And if it doesn't occur, those impacts are going to be felt far and wide for a long time.
Yeah, this is a massive, dangerous shit show, and it is not the league's fault. I don't know how you prepare for this. There's really nothing they could do to adequately prepare for it because this has never happened before. It'll probably never happen again. So this is not me blaming the league because I don't know what they could have done. Like, yeah, we could say, oh, well, they should have a plan. You try to plan for this, okay? Like, I don't care who you are. There's no way you can, with how much information changes from week to week basis, there's no way you can really prepare. So I don't necessarily blame them. But at the same time, there is no plan. And it's a shit show. And it's not going to go well. Will we actually have a season? Probably, in some form. Will it be a season that I think we look back on and think, oh yeah, that totally counted? Probably not. Like, this is the asterisk season to me. There's no way it's not going to be. It's still going to be football. It's still going to be fun to watch. But in the back of your mind, you're always going to be thinking like, this one doesn't really count. At least for me, that's how I'm going to look at it. Because I think there's going to be so many players out on a week-to-week basis, let alone the playoffs. It's going to be the asterisk season. Again, it's going to be what I think gets this country through the end of this pandemic, hopefully the end of this pandemic, because I think we all just need sports and we need something to watch. But by no means do I expect this to be a season as normal. It's not possible.
Yeah, and honestly, my biggest hope is that everybody makes decisions that helps keep them safe. Look, that's the biggest thing, and you mentioned it with college, and it's the same for the pros, right? Am I willing to give up the season? Look, the NFL is a big part of my life. I obviously really enjoy watching it, talk about it, analyze it, overanalyze it. But would I be willing to toss it so that all those players could continue living? And the answer is yeah.
And coaches,
yeah,
too.
I absolutely would. Yeah, and that's everybody. Coaches, teams, support staff, all the people that NFL players see. There's a huge halo of support systems around each individual player. There's nutritionists and chefs and masseuses and chiropractors and there's all these people that surround this enterprise again to keep them running and healthy and everything. And everybody's at risk, right? And you can't put everybody in the bubble if you do a bubble. So I want everybody to be safe. I don't want anybody to have to bury their kid or dad or son or daughter for that matter. It doesn't seem worth it to me when we know it's incredibly dangerous to shove them into this environment. Look, the NFL is dangerous anyways, and people will make that argument. I don't know how you, with a straight face, argue that this isn't different than that. This is very different. It's a global pandemic. So we don't know what's going to go on. I know that's not a very hopeful outlook. It certainly doesn't pump us up when we could all use some good news. And, maybe something happens, quote unquote, and then a miracle occurs and we get some relief from this and there are safer ways to conduct the games. That would be my biggest hope. But again, not being a betting man, I wouldn't put folding money on that one.
Yeah, it's a hope for the best, expect the worst scenario through and through. That's what it is.
Yep.
And we will hope for the best because we love football. I mean, football is my job. I depend on it. I really hope it happens. But at the same time, I want it to happen safely. So we're hoping for the best, kind of expecting the worst. But either way, we'll keep doing
be
shows.
Here. We can do this.
We can do this
from the safety of our own homes and have for some number of months now. So we got some good practice. But we'll be here bringing you guys content either way. But until then, if you've got suggestions for stuff you'd like to see us do over the summer, we've got some interviews in mind. We definitely have some good content lined up, but we're always open to your suggestions. Your support is so encouraging to us. We couldn't do this without you. Really wouldn't want to do this without all of you out there who listen to the podcast, watch it on YouTube, interact with us on Twitter. So keep that up. If you've got ideas, we've had some folks toss out ideas of people they'd love to see interviewed. That lined up pretty well because those are some of the same people that we want to see interviews. But yeah, throw it out there. If you've got an idea for content, we'd love to take a look. We shoot from the hip on Bootleg, so we're more than happy to adjust if we get a great idea from somebody. So feel free to toss that stuff out there. In the meantime, keep yourselves safe, keep your family safe. Keep listening. We'll keep putting out content. We'll talk to you soon.
Later.